So the topic for today seems to have not really a lot of common with spirituality, mysticism, but I come to it because I've said in more of my videos, spirituality inherently needs freedom, and any obstruction of freedom deeply cuts into spirituality. When I still remember, I was born in a very different world. Right? I was born under Soviet occupation into a communist regime, and there was spirituality even under oppression. It's not that it doesn't exist, but at the same time, I remember then when the 90s came in, and we break free, and got flooded with all this new information and possibilities to read texts that have been prohibited at that time, because autocratic regimes, one of the typical sort of sign how you can spot what's autocratic is if they start censoring, or if they censor authors and books, which the communists did. And it's really scary to see nowadays so-called modern liberal societies doing basically the same. And the funny thing is they are censoring the same crazy books like Huxley's Brave New World and Orwell's 1984. And I think if you look at the top 20 most censored book in the world, Orwell is twice there as the only author. So that's saying something, right? So oppression limits your spiritual freedom, and yes, you can still be spiritual and there can still be mystics in oppression, but from an overall perspective of humanity, a free society is where you reduce the most of suffering. So freedom is reduction of suffering, and reduction of suffering is inherently what the mystical path goes with. And there are a couple of really disturbing things that I see, and I want to sort of comment on while I'm walking here again in the forest. So the first thing that I want to go back to my childhood, right? Being born in this autocratic Soviet-occupied communist regime, I haven't seen a single homeless person, right? So when in the 90s the first homeless people actually came into my view, was a concept I couldn't even comprehend, because I was like, how can you be homeless? I mean, up till through my whole childhood, it was pretty simple. Obviously, I didn't understood it in the depth, as a child would never understand. I never saw a homeless person as a child, and that was because under the regime that I was born into, everybody had, in quotation marks, a right to work. What it actually meant that everybody must work, right? Now there were exceptions if you were like a strong proponent of the regime, and if you made your money on the black market, you either paid the doctor to get a disability certificate, or even people paid other people to do their jobs who have been already retired. So there was a whole industry of people who managed to circumnavigate this. But ultimately it was about everybody has to work, everybody has a right to work, and if you don't accommodate your right, you will be forced to work, in a sense that if you had no job and didn't have a certificate for disability, for example, then what happened was you would be charged, and there was a prison sentence behind it, right? So basically, in a sense, you could say, on one hand, it was sold through the propaganda as everybody has a right to work. On the other, it was like everybody is sort of enslaved into working, right? And I don't want to go into the details what that meant. It's a different topic. But looking now into the United States and what the US administration does. So what they basically did, from the perspective here, looks like they basically, in essence, outlawed homelessness. And there is a guidance to the security forces which basically states that homeless people are either homeless because they are on drugs, which happens, right? Homeless people can be on drugs, can be exposed to drugs, and there is a certain correlation between homelessness and being on drugs, although it's not automatically. If you, for example, would look into the homelessness of Japanese people, it's a very different story than homelessness of US people. So they say you are either a homeless if you're an addict, or you are homeless because you have mental health issues. They completely neglect homelessness caused by major economic factors, and your factory just closes and you get fired, and because most of the people live paycheck to paycheck, your slippage into homelessness is extremely fast, right? So you're mentally okay, you are no drug addict, but circumstances of scale outside of your control basically got you fired, and you very easily got into homelessness. So what does it mean if they say that homelessness is basically either addiction, which you can say is a mental illness, or mental illness itself? So if they reduce homelessness into mental illness, then what they actually are doing is saying the solution for homelessness will be mental asylums. Okay, now a strong parallel to the autocratic regime that I was born into, because mental asylum was exactly the place where they would put some of the anti-regime people, right? So you could have ended up in the mental asylum because in the perspective of the communist who was against communism must have been crazy, right? So that's one. Or the other would be they actually put you into a prison. It really depended how much the regime was felt threatened by you, right? The threat was really something that has determined the way how they handled you. Now, from the perspective of the US and their guidance of this administration, right? I mean, obviously, you will not solve the issue by putting people into mental asylum, especially people that don't belong there. But it may create the image that you wiped the streets clean, though by the amounts of the people that are actually out to the amount of places in mental asylums, that will become a probably really huge industry to actually go by, and obviously it will be fully state paid, state sponsored, so it becomes basically, from a business perspective, absolutely superb business for those who will invest there, because being on the state paycheck, not as an employee, that may suck, but as a company, that's basically a gold mine, right? So what does it mean for the people, and what does it mean for the US as such? Now, if you think it through, and especially if you understand pieces of the American culture, right, there is something that America has in common with the regime I was born with, and that's the focus on, you need to work. And not working is really socially unacceptable. Work hard, build your career, right? Unless you're rich, right? Then it's okay. So what will happen when you gather all the homeless people, basically declare them mentally ill for whatever reasons, addiction, mental illness, or just being homeless, right? That itself is now becoming a diagnosis. So you put them into mental asylums. The capacities might not be there, so you overcrowd them, create more and more human suffering, and then, somebody comes with the great idea, actually, that since this is a state business, that it will be absolutely great to build new ones and get the subsidiaries from the state and make money out of it. But then the other question will become, okay, so now you have those people in these private asylums that you really don't have a lot of insight into and control over. So, the probability that abuse will be there, as it is in mental asylums, is pretty high. So you are even putting more human suffering on already suffered people. So what's then the next point that will happen? Obviously, the next point that will happen is that someone comes with the question, and the question is definitely already on the table. All right, so who will pay for this treatment, right? And how long will it take, right? Oh, I mean, obviously, if you put a homeless person for being homeless into a mental asylum, then there is a never-ending solution, because if you release the person from the mental asylum, they are back to homeless, which causes to put them back into the mental asylum. So you create an infinity loop of people that will be put into institutions that they can never leave, because leaving the institution itself would be a reason for returning into the institution. Right? So from a exploitative perspective of business, so if you have a business that's not afraid of making their money by human suffering and exploitation, which, let's be honest, it's a lot of industries and businesses, and probably right now as you're listening and watching this, you might do it on a device that's actually built on human exploitation. All the sweatshops that building the phones that are used, and sweatshops for putting together the dress that people are wearing. It's like crazy, right? So exploitation became a hidden, wannabe unseen fact of modern society, consumer society, right? It's consumerist society. So we consume, it needs to be as cheap produced as possible, and cheap production goes hand in hand mostly with human exploitation. So the businesses are already used to exploit humans, some of the businesses, and the risk there becomes that basically this asylums would be very easily to be exploited, because you have people that have no way of defending themselves. And since they will be fully under the control of the asylum, that may even take away their rights, they might not even have a right to even contact somebody outside, or a lawyer, or anybody. So you create a group of people that will be very, very easy to be exploited, and where there is temptation, there is the crime, right? And that's the high risk. So people will be put into mental asylums because they are homeless. They cannot be put out because they would be homeless, which is the cause of being in those asylums for the first place. It costs a lot of money. So what will be the solution of not costing it money with a group of people that will be absolutely easy to exploit? Forced labor. Now, forced labor is really unpopular. So PR managers will come in and they will say, yeah, well, let's not call it that we force labor the people, bad marketing, bad for business. Let's say that labor is therapy, right? And if you look into history of exploitation of human beings in relation to labor and sort of slogans that got into sort of overarching this exploitation, you definitely will find very easily examples where labor and work was deemed as a way to freedom in exploitation. Pretty sure that it was all across the 20th century of the autocratic regimes. So the idea will be, yeah, the thing that those people need, they are ill because they are homeless, and the solution to their homelessness is that we let them work. And by working, they will actually pay their own bills for being in a forced labor camp, because then this asylum facility basically becomes a forced labor camp. That's what it will be. So you will have a forced labor camp with people that will lose their rights to actually even fight against. And their labor will be seen as therapy for a sickness that will basically be made up, right? Homelessness. And the probabilities are extremely high, because you have, on one hand, a shortage of manual hard labor works, like be it on the farms or be it in manufacturing. And the gap will need to be filled with the madness that the current administration in the US does with immigrants, right? So they will need to fill it, and they maybe find a way, and there definitely will be the temptation to fill it with people that will be for those exploitative businesses even cheaper than immigrants, namely people that you don't even need to pay and that can't even fight back. So, question stands, will the United States, on the trajectory where they are, with how they are now building their own identity and policies, regardless of this president or next one, will they de facto build labor camps? Yeah, it remains to be seen. You will find your own answers.